It's just nice to see, the Mr. Robot example and you actually doing it and showing, is it real or is it just a movie scene? And it's nice to see you, actually showing us how to do it.
And today is going to be among the most advanced, the most complex hacks that we saw in Mr. Robot, and maybe the most valuable in that we're going to be looking at essentially creating a mobile spy machine.
Hey everyone, David Bombal back with Occupy the Web. If you haven't seen our previous videos, he's the author of this book, Linux Basics for Hackers. Fantastic book if you want to learn Linux, but also from a hacker's perspective. And he's also the author of this book, Getting Started Becoming a Master Hacker. Occupy the Web, welcome.
It's good to be back again, David. It's always great to be talking to you and talking about hacking. I love this effort of trying to explain the Mr. Robot hack. So let's do another one today. And today is going to be among the most advanced, the most complex hacks that we saw in Mr. Robot, and maybe the most valuable in that we're going to be looking at essentially creating a mobile spy machine.
I love that. So you've kind of mentioned it offline, and I don't want to jump the gun. So which episode are we talking about?
This is season 2. I think it's episode 5. I'm pretty sure it's episode 5. They talk about it in episode 4. They do it in episode 5. And this is, we know that Elliot has taken down Evil Corp, right? Him and F Society have taken down Evil Corp, and we have this kind of chaos in the global economy, right? And we've now have lots of things going on, including the Chinese are now involved, and we have the FBI's involved. FBI is actually in China. We have the female FBI agent. What's her name? DePiro, I think is her name. Dom DePiro is her name. Dom DePiro is in China. She's meeting with the Chinese. The FBI are on the trail of Elliot and his whole gang. They're kind of freaking out. They're getting paranoid. They realize that their FBI are not very far behind, and so they've got to come up with a plan to be able to find out what the FBI know, because everybody is getting paranoid, thinking that they're going to be arrested soon for the 5.9 hack. And so they come up with this plan to be able to spy on the FBI. In the first part, we learned that the FBI has switched, to Android phones. Okay, that's the first step. That comes up in episode 4. All right. And then in episode 5, we see Elliot begins to develop some exploits, but he has to have a way to be able to deliver the exploits. And so what he comes up with is to basically create a mini cell tower that he's going to place inside of Evil Corp. And Angela, who's now working for Evil Corp, she can walk in apparently and place it in, apparently, that's kind of a big if, right? But, and place it in the Evil Corp to be able to pick up the cell signals from the FBI. And of course, then also implant some malware. So what we're talking about here is what's called a femtocell. This is a femtocell. These are a couple of femtocells, and these are the ones that are actually used in the show. And I have this one right here. I bought this one a few years ago. This is the new, you can see this, of course, right?
Yep.
Okay. So what these are is that all of the cell companies, no matter where you're at around the world, they sell what are called network extenders. These are for people who live in areas where there is not good cell service. So you put one of these in your home, you put one of these in your office. If you don't have good cell service, maybe it's a dead zone. And essentially what it does is it works as a cell tower within your home or office. Now, we know, maybe not, but we do, that your cell phone will connect to the closest and strongest cell signal. And so essentially what these are, by putting one of these in somebody's home or office, they're going to connect to this femtocell and kind of give you a diagram of what it looks like in somebody's home. It's like, so here's the femtocell in somebody's home. They got a cell phone. It's an old style flip phone there. It's kind of an old diagram. And then the femtocell connects to broadband access into the internet. Okay, and then connects to the cell network, right? So it is essentially intercepting the cell signal and putting it across the internet into the cellular network. All right, so it goes through the internet into the cellular network. So,
can I ask you, is this similar to the Stingray type thing because that's the one you always hear about, like the police or whatever, FBI, whatever, using these Stingray ISMI catcher type things, right?
Exactly. So essentially what this is that it's a mini Stingray. All right. It's a mini Stingray, whereas a Stingray can capture signals for, a large distance. So you can put one in a neighborhood and it'll pick up all the cell signals in that neighborhood, and the FBI and others, law enforcement, use them. And it's only legal for law enforcement to actually have one. It's not legal for anybody else to have one. I will put out there that at Hackers Arise, we're working on building one with a software-defined radio. So that's part of our project here. So we'll see.
You better come on the show when you've got that ready. Sorry to interrupt.
Well, it's pretty much ready. Okay, it's not something, we're not inventing it. Okay, we're building it because it's already been invented, but you can go ahead and use a software-defined radio to make a Stingray. Now, it's illegal to actually own one, a Stingray. We'll put this up on your channel. We'll put it up on Hackers Arise in the future.
But a femtocell is legal, right?
A femtocell is legal, so that's a good thing. Femtocell is legal, right? So this is being sold from the largest carrier in the U.S., which is Verizon. They sell them on their website. This is coming right off their website, very similar to the one that I have. I bought mine off eBay for, I think, $120 a few years ago. And people sell them on eBay because they bring them home and they don't want them or don't need them, and they put them up on eBay. New, they cost between $250 to $300. And it's a legal device that the carriers, and all the carriers sell them, but they're all slightly different. So what I'm showing you here today is going to apply in general to all of them, but specifics are going to be very different. So every carrier has their own. Notice you can see here the Samsung logo right here. I don't know if you can see that in the screen. Yeah. So these are made by Samsung. Verizon makes the Samsung. Other carriers use other manufacturers, to make these. And what these are is just a mini cell tower. The key on this mini cell tower is to be able to get inside of it. Because if we can get inside of it, then in essence, we can eavesdrop and do a man in the middle on all the traffic that goes through it. And that's essentially what Elliot's doing in the show. All right. So we see him, he's developing an exploit, but what he's doing is he's going to put that exploit into the femtocell. So the first step to getting inside the femtocell is that I have one here, and I've taken some pictures, to show you. The first step is you look down at the bottom right here. Well, I'm going to back up a little bit. Okay, so there's both enterprise level femtocells and there's consumer level femtocells. Right, so we're looking at a consumer level. It's actually a little bit easier to hack the enterprise level femtocells. On the consumer level, which are cheap ones, right? That's what we're talking about here. There's a connection down below in the bottom of these things, right here. And what's that look like? Can you see it? You see what kind of connection that is?
I can see it, yep.
What does it look like?
I can't see clearly. Is it like RJ45 or is it like a screen?
I mean, look at it. I'm going to bring it a little closer.
You're testing me. I'm not sure. I can see it.
Oh, you can't see it? Okay. It's an HDMI connection.
Oh, I thought it might be. Yeah. Well, let me pretend that I knew what it was. Is it HDMI?
Yes, it's an HDMI, exactly. But what can we do with an HDMI? I mean, this is what's really puzzling when you see this. You go, what can I do with this HDMI connection here, right? Yeah. It turns out that the Samsung and Verizon have a specially made cable that is essentially USB on one end and HDMI on the other end.
Oh, but wow. You can't, because HDMI, you think it's just a monitor. Why would you want a screen connected to such a device? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. But they've developed their own unique and proprietary cables to be able to get inside of these things. Right? But it's not that hard to make your own. And so that's what we're going to do next. Right? So this is basically, I'm looking at the bottom side under here on that last picture. So what we need to do is that we can go out okay, and this is actually, I bought this one, I think off Amazon. And what we can do is by using an HDMI cable and this cable, it's called a FTDI PTL 232R. And then we can take this cable. So if you want to buy one, they're about anywhere from about $7 or $8 to $15 in that area. They're not that expensive. And so what we can do is we can splice these two cables together, the HDMI cable and this cable. And this is the wiring for it. You take the HDMI bare copper ground to the FTDI black. There's the FTDI black right there. And the HDMI white to the FTDI yellow, and the HDMI orange to the FTDI orange. Okay.
How did you work this out? Was this just like trial and error, or did you find the specification somewhere?
I found specifications for it.
Wow.
So
well done.
I'm not the first one to do this. And so this actually comes from a hack that was developed and was first presented at Black Hat in like 2011. I think it was 2011. And so, but the specifications, they didn't give these specifications for the cables at Black Hat. So I had to go digging around some of the manuals for these femtocells to find out what the cabling was like. So anyways, once you have this cable, then you can access the console inside the femtocell. So the first step is we got to build the cable. That's the first step. Right? Got to build the cable that gives us a proprietary access to the femtocell through that HDMI port. That's step number one. And we're far from done, because when we get inside the femtocell, essentially we have a very small Linux kernel. Okay, it's called Monta Linux. Some of you may have heard of it before. It's used in a lot of IoT devices. So it's a company out of California that makes these really small Linux kernels put in all kinds of devices. And so that's what's inside the femtocell. But you'll find, if you'll find Monta Linux in all kinds of IoT devices, no matter what whether it be a router or baby monitor, what have you. These all use very small Linux. And so this is once again, I'm going to plug Learning Linux if you want to be a hacker, right? So
let's see which book should you read? But there's more.
But there's more, yes. So that book, we're really looking at Linux as how to use it as an attack tool. But the truth of the matter is that all these IoT devices also have Linux. So you get inside one of these devices, and if you don't know Linux, you can't find your way around, right? You don't know how to find anything, what to do with it. You need to know Linux to be able to do this. It ends up
Linux is like speaking English, let's say in the US or the UK. It's like a basic skill that you have to have these days in IT, I think. I
agree. It's a basic skill you have to have. So once you're inside, now you got this Monta Linux, but it doesn't have a bash shell. So it's not like what we're accustomed to, right? And so it becomes pretty hard to work with. Once again, this is a pretty complex hack, but it can be done. So
it's just nice to see, because sorry to interrupt again. It's just nice to see, the Mr. Robot example and you actually doing it and showing, is it real or is it just a movie scene? And it's nice to see you, actually showing us how to do it.
It's real, but it's not easy, right? And that's once again, we've always talked about Mr. Robot and the time frame that he works in. And this one, if they were already familiar, one of the team was already familiar with it. Yeah, it might be able to get done in a few days that they had, but it's not easy. Right. So once we're inside, we've got the console, we've got to get root access. And so here's the two models that Verizon uses. And these are two methods to escalate privileges to get to root. So the one I have is this one right here, which is the easier one. And Verizon now says that this no longer works, but it doesn't matter because we can just go buy the old ones that have never been updated off eBay or any place and get root access. And so once we got root access on these things, right? So we now are in, we've got root access on the Linux inside this device. Unfortunately, even with root access, it's not really functional. We can't do a whole lot with it. And so if you watch closely on Mr. Robot, you'll see that this comes up. See the screen right here? This is OpenWRT. These are Linux images that can be used on IoT devices. So if you've got some hardware, you can go ahead and download the Linux to install and flash into the IoT device. Here's all the hardware this has been going on for years, and very few people are familiar with it. You can just download the software. It's open source software for a particular device, for any device. And this is what they do, is that basically they take this femtocell and now they go ahead and flash it with a Linux operating system that they have developed themselves, or they've basically taken the image from here and made some alterations to it. In the show, what happens is that Elliot actually puts some malware. He puts malware, it's kind of a well-known browser RCE exploit into the femtocell that would then put the shell code onto the phones. What I'm most interested in from this perspective is being able to eavesdrop on the traffic. So we don't need to actually have an RCE. We don't need to have any exploit at all to be able to listen in and watch the traffic. So Elliot is trying to infect the phones, but to be able to listen in, there's still a few things that we need to do. You can see all of the data traffic, okay, it all goes unencrypted, but the SMS traffic and the phone traffic, you have to be able to decode that traffic because it's all encoded, but that's publicly available information that you can decode. It's really kind of beyond the scope of what we're doing here today. I'm just trying to give you the outlines of what can be done to be able to build essentially a small spy device, a mini Stingray that gives you access to all of the mobile traffic in the area. Now, these Stingrays are kind of low power, so the target has to be within 15 feet of the the femtocell, to be able to connect to it, but they can then travel within 50 feet of the femtocell, and they'll still be connected to that femtocell. So the initial connection has to be within about 15 feet. So what is that? About 5 meters, and then about 16 meters in that range. They travel throughout the room or the office. You can pick up all of their traffic. So it's kind of giving you the bare outlines of what we have to do, but there's a lot of work involved here. Probably, the first step, of course, is getting that cable made so you can get access to the device, and then you have to go ahead and flash it. You've got root access, and then you got to flash it with a new Linux kernel. Right? And then once you have new Linux kernel, then you have access to all of the traffic that's going over the device.
But I mean, if you put that in the ceiling, or like he did, like they hid it in a storeroom or something, didn't they? And then then the distance is fine. Yeah,
he put it in the floor. In the show, there's a scene where Angela puts it on the floor and connects it into the Ethernet cable there.
Yeah,
but it's kind of a large device. It's probably, it's not that large. It's the size of a small purse. Okay. But it's, if it's set on the floor next to other electronic devices, it may be, people may not notice it, but it's not, so small like a Raspberry Pi that is basically people are not going to see it. But, one of the things that I wanted to point out is this OpenWRT project, which, I don't think many people are familiar with it, and that you can go ahead and get open source firmware for just about any IoT device, right? And then if you have your own firmware, of course, then you can make your own edits to it and have it do just about anything that you want. And that's what Elliot does in the show, is that he goes and downloads firmware, and much of this is Monta Linux for various different devices. You can see it here. Here's some of the Cisco devices here, and some.
Like you said, though, it's quite a complex thing because you'd have to connect to that cell and then flash it basically, and then somehow capture the traffic going through it.
Yeah, and so the hardest part, once you got the cable, then you got to go and flash it. Okay, you got to get root access, then flash it, and then you got to go ahead and figure out what the codecs are for the SMS and the voice traffic across it. I'll also point out that on the enterprise level of these femtocells, they're actually a little bit easier because they have a standard connection. To connect to the enterprise level, it's simply a Ethernet connection, right?
That's much easier. Yeah.
Yeah, much easier. And then the root password on it is femtocell and then XXX, 4 X's, 4.
So secure.
Femtocell, okay, a capital F, a capital C, and then the last 4 digits of the serial number on the device, right? So those are the keys are being able to connect into the device, then get root access. Okay, on the enterprise level one, it's the default password is public, where the X's represent the last 4 digits of the serial number of the device. For these consumer level ones, it's a little more difficult. And as I said earlier, is that Verizon has said they've now closed this vulnerability. The vulnerability that they've closed is that the ease of getting the root password. But like I said, there's always a way to get to escalate privileges, right? So this is basically a privilege escalation issue, and it's going to differ from device to device. So, this applies to these Samsung devices that Verizon uses, that I have, and are used on the show. But if you're, if you're in UK, if you're in Germany, if you're in China, they're all going to be using, and different carriers are going to be using different femtocells. So, but the process is still going to be the same. One, get yourself into the console. In our case here, we had to build a special cable to get ourselves into the console. Then once you're inside the console, then get root privileges. And then 3, you have to go ahead and flash it with a more complete Linux operating system. And then once you have that inside the system, then you can go ahead and put in something like TCP dump or Wireshark and watch the traffic. You can watch the data traffic from there without having to do anything further. But as far as the SMS traffic and the voice traffic, it has to be, you have to find the proper codecs that particular company is using to be able to decode the SMS traffic and the voice traffic. It's a complex task. If you build one, you've got yourself a really cool spy tool, okay, that you can use. And like Elliot did, Elliot used it both. Remember, he listened into the FBI conversations, and he also hacked their phones with it, because he used, as their traffic is going through the femtocells, he's sending an exploit to their phones and taking control of their phones. But you don't have to take control over the phones. You can just simply listen in on all the traffic, both the data traffic, the SMS traffic, and the voice traffic. Essentially, you're taking control of the femtocell.
What they showed in Mr. Robot is once again realistic, but like you always say, it's the time frames, right, that are not realistic.
Yeah, it's very realistic. It's been done. There's a lot of research into these devices. Some of that research has been published. You can find the research and be able to do it yourself, but it's time consuming, but somebody's already done it. And so it can be done. The guys who originally did this at Black Hat were ISEC Partners did it, and they did it like 2011. So this would have been available to Elliot when the show was made in 2014, 2015. So he would have had this kind of research already available to him to be able to hack the femtocell. And it was also in the show, it shows that he is actually he's building a browser exploit that was well known at that time. It came out like in 2014, that he's building in the show in Ruby. If you watch closely, he's building an exploit in Ruby to be able to put into the femtocell to then be able to place the exploit onto everybody's phone who connects to it.
That's great. And the device that you're building, is that using like HackRF or some kind of software-defined radio like that? Well,
the device that we're working on is actually a Stingray, right? A Stingray-like device that actually is using Lime SDR, right? So the HackRF is a nice piece of hardware that can do a lot of things, but it's only half duplex, okay? So It can't go in both directions. It also is relatively slow. It's half duplex. It only uses USB 2, not USB 3, and it's relatively slow. So we're building with a Lime SDR, which is a lot faster. It's full duplex. It can go USB 3, what have you. So it has a lot of the capabilities, basically enhanced capabilities of like the HackRF. The HackRF is a nice hobbyist and a learning tool, but when you start getting into like serious projects, you got to take a bump up to these little bit more powerful pieces of hardware and a little bit more expensive.
I like to ask the sort of the beginner questions or the dumb questions, for lack of a better word. The femtocell is connecting, it's using cell phone frequencies. So the phone connects via typical cell phone connections to the femtocell. And then it's connecting via IP. Yeah, sorry, go on.
Right, exactly. So here we have the cell phone. It's connecting to the femtocell. The femtocell then via Ethernet is connecting to the broadband gateway. The gateway then is going via IP, out to the internet, to the radio network controller and the whole network of the mobile carrier. Now, the backhaul on these femtocells is varying. Some of them are private networks and some of them simply use the public internet. So it varies by carrier, but really it's not that important to us because what we're doing is we're intercepting right here at this stage right here. We're inside this device, but there are some people who've worked on trying to intercept this traffic in here. And of course, when we start talking about building a Stingray, essentially what we're doing is building this whole tower right here with the BTS. They call the macro cell BTS. You're building a cell tower with an entire cell phone transmission unit.
My question was, couldn't you run a sniffer between the femtocell and the gateway, like in that diagram? So it's got broadband access. Could you sniff the traffic, or is it all encrypted?
Well, it's all encrypted from here to here. So that's what
okay.
Actually, that's part of the problem that you run into is that one, this is all encrypted. And so you have to intercept the traffic before it gets encrypted. Yeah. And so, that's why you need to go ahead and change the Linux kernel inside that device, because as it's built, it's encrypting it as soon as it hits the kernel, and you can't get it before it gets encrypted. So that's why Elliot changes the kernel. Okay, that's why he uses OpenWRT to change the Linux kernel before it gets encrypted. And then once he has that, he can see all the traffic.
It's interesting. In the UK, I don't know if it's the same in the US. In the UK, carriers allow you to make calls on your Wi-Fi. So if you've got no cell phone reception, but like your home broadband is there, it'll just jump onto the home broadband. So you just make calls and receive calls on your Wi-Fi. Is it similar in the US?
Yeah, in the US you can make calls on the Wi-Fi here as well.
So the same problem there. If the traffic's encrypted, that's why you can't sniff it, right?
Yeah, the traffic's encrypted there. So they're mostly in most of the carriers now, especially when you get to 4G. When you talk about 2G and 3G, the authentication and encryption is very weak. Right? When you get to 4G and 5G, it gets much stronger and it's harder to break. Actually, these femtocells are using 3G, so they're a little bit slower than regular traffic. But this is for people who don't have any traffic in their area. If you're no cell in their area, if you're making phone, wouldn't even notice the difference between 3G and 4G, but it's only when you're sending data traffic through that you'll notice the difference. But for regular cell calls, you won't notice the difference at all.
I think I kind of missed it, so I think we should emphasize that if with that femtocell, you can eavesdrop on SMSs. It's typical like cellular phone calls, but also the internet traffic that would typically go across like 4G or 3G. Is that right?
Yes. So you can get the internet traffic is unencrypted at the femtocell. The SMS is encrypted, but it can be decrypted, and the voice traffic can be decrypted as well.
And this was demonstrated, like you said, at Black Hat 2011, right?
I think it was first shown. There's been a number of researchers who have worked on it. The folks at ISEC Partners demonstrated it at Black Hat 2011, and then somebody else did it in 2010. And then there's been a number of researchers who have continued this research in recent years. There's a fellow in China who's been doing, he's been tearing apart all these femtocells around the world, and basically he says they're all vulnerable to being hacked, right? And so, but the hack is going to be different depending on what femtocell you're using. In this case, we're just talking about this one that's probably the most widely used in the United States. Verizon has about 1/3 of all the mobile customers in the US. And this is the product that they're still selling that they use for people who are in dead zones of the cellular network. And the new ones, they say that you can't get root access. So if you can't get root access, you can't obviously flash the Linux kernel. There's always a way, right? There's always a way. There's always a way. So they've made it harder, but there's still always a way. And then how you're going to get root access on the others is going to vary by the company who manufactures it and the carrier who's carrying it.
So we weren't able to show everything here. Do you have, I always ask the question because you've always got these amazing courses. Have you got a course on this, or are you covering some of this in your courses?
I don't have a course on it, but I think I'm going to go ahead and put at least a tutorial up on Hackers Rise on all the steps. I have to
That'd be great.
I have to be a little bit careful on this one.
Yeah, definitely.
So I'm still trying to decide the whole Stingray thing being illegal. It puts me in kind of legal jeopardy there.
Yeah.
This one is actually a legal device that is being hacked. It's something that I'm considering doing and putting it up on Hackers Rise on how to do it. But I've got one here that's very vulnerable. I bought it about 3 years ago off eBay, and it's relatively easy to hack. Relatively easy, meaning it takes 2 or 3 days of work.
For you, not for us, but for you.
Not for 30 seconds.
Occupy the Web, I really want to thank you for sharing your knowledge. And I have to say this, it would take you 2 days, but for the rest of us, it might take a lot longer than that. But thank you for, sharing your knowledge, but also talking about how realistic Mr. Robot is and, why you enjoy it. For everyone who's watching, put below what you'd like us to cover. We've been reading the comments, so we've been seeing the kind of things that you've been asking for, and hopefully we're kind of covering the most popular topics. But put your comments below. Let us know what you want to cover. Occupy the Web, as always. Thanks so much.
Okay, thanks, David.